Our thoughts, hearts, and prayers are with everyone that has been affected by the LA fires. And so we thought that today we would spend some time speaking to an insurance professional to answer a lot of the questions that are out there with so much uncertainty. Today we're going to be speaking with Tim Weidenkeller with Farmers Insurance, and we're going to be asking him all of the questions that we've been receiving to give you clarity and to know how to navigate through all of this. Life is like Monopoly, every move counts. I'm Gia Silva, real estate broker and investor, and I've helped hundreds of people make winning, smart real estate moves. Tim, thank you so much for being here with us today. I know that in the last week, right, just the last week since the LA fires, I am sure you have been pulled left and right with questions. And so, yeah, today I wanted to just bring some clarity with people. And so since in the last week, what have you been seeing, hearing, and what are some of the questions that you're getting from those who have been affected?
Perfect. I had 7 of my clients' homes completely burned down. Wow. Yeah. I still get a little emotional because it's, when you see people lose their livelihood, it's a little tough. People you've known for years. Now we're starting, calls came in on the Wednesday and the Thursday. Once they understood their home was gone, they found out different ways. And then today and yesterday, the smoke damage calls are coming in. So there's kind of 2 different things. Smoke damage can be as bad as almost your house burning down, except you not have to rebuild your house and go through the whole permitting process, all that. You just have to have a crew come in and clean your house. And you can't just take your clothes to the cleaners. You have to put them in ozone chambers for 7 days. There's a lot involved, and even a smoky house that's at a level you can't live in it, you may be out for 6 months.
Wow.
So there's a lot of moving parts. I think the biggest questions now, after dealing with people that have lost their home and walking them through that program and how that works, there are a lot of people, probably had over 500 phone calls asking, am I covered for fire? Because most homeowners policies are called HO3 for 3 perils, and the 3 perils are water, wind, and fire. Okay. But there's a lot of misinformation out there today because in certain high fire risk areas, you have a policy that doesn't have fire included in it, fire and wind. That's through the California Fair Plan. Okay. And so the other policy has everything but that. So an example, Farmers used to insure homes and all the high fire risks, and all the companies have gotten out of it. So they non-renew you in a traditional 3-peril policy. Okay. And you then go and write right back into a farmer's policy minus the fire and wind and attach that to the Fair Plan policy. Okay. And so now there are areas that have almost exclusively Fair Plan policies for their fire and wind coverage, but there are still remnants of old policies out there that have the full thing, water, wind, and fire. Okay. So some of the misinformation is that the neighbors are telling well, if you don't have the Fair Plan, you don't have fire coverage. That's not necessarily true. So people are panicked, and those are a lot of calls we're getting. And I think just in general, I think people kind of think they have fire coverage, but they're not completely sure. So we're getting those calls. Okay. And then there are some rumors floating around that if it was arson, it's not covered. Well, it depends who lights the fire, because if you light your fire on your own house because you want to take part in this and get insurance payout, and they prove that arson would not be paid, but that is paid by, if, in this case, if it proves that it wasn't arson that started the fire, the insurance will pay out. The other thing we're hearing, and this is kind of interesting, is that I've got fielded phone calls when people say, oh my gosh, the money from my insurance company is going to go to pay off my mortgage payment. Okay. Partially true. What happens is that when you have a house burned down, and a lot of these ones that I've had up in Pacific Palisades, the rebuild cost is somewhere around, $1.5 million to $3 million, right? It's big homes, and they cost a lot to rebuild. And so I got a call from one of the owners saying, why, I understand that the payout's going to go pay off my mortgage for that house. Not necessarily true. So what happens is when you have a large claim, the check gets made out to the homeowner, and on every policy with a lender, you have the mortgagee clause, which is the lender is connected on that policy. Yeah. And there are certain instructions that the insurance company has to fulfill by adding that mortgagee clause. One of them is that on large claims, they will make the check out to the homeowner and to the lender. Now what happens is they're going to send you the check, the homeowner. Okay. And then you're going to go to the bank and try to cash that baby, and they're going to say, sorry, you have to have endorsed by the lender. So they call the lender when they can't cash the check, and the lender says, the mortgage company says, we need you to endorse that and send the check to us. We are going to hold the check for you. When you get a contractor to rebuild the house, we will pay the contractor based on their schedule. They're protecting themselves, so somebody taking the money and leaving with it.
Right.
Now, there are going to be many people in this situation that are not going to rebuild their home. They're going to sell the lot. In that case, the lender may take the money and pay off the loan, or because they're not going to give it back to the client, they're going to hold that, and with that money pay off the loan when they sell the land. In some cases, the land is probably as much as the land and the home on it, if it's an older home, and then their balance on that loan to pay it off will go down. So there is some truth to that, but what's happening is that people think, I'm not going to have any money to rebuild my home because the insurance money is going to pay down my loan, and that's not the case.
Okay, so it's not the case, and even if their mortgage balance was really, really high, right? And with the money that they're getting from the insurance wouldn't cover, like you said, the rebuilding cost. So are you saying that the mortgage company is then going to work with them on that? Okay, on taking less of a payment.
Yes.
Got it. On taking less of a mortgage balance payment.
No, not that. So, if you end up just selling and walking away.
Yes.
Now, people still have to pay their mortgage. Now, there's probably going to be some...
That definitely was the question,
There's going to be some forbearance probably, but remember last time, lenders said, oh, it's not going to impact your credit, but then the banks looked at it and said, oh, you had forbearance and they didn't want to loan to you in a certain period of time.
Yes.
So it's going to be the same situation, but with your policy, in most cases, you have what's called loss of use or loss of rents. And depending on if it's a rental property or a homeowner's policy, you're getting paid up to 3 years now. Once they declared emergency, I think you have to extend that to the 3 years. So wherever they're living should be paid by the insurance company, and then they still have to pay their mortgage.
Got it. Okay. Now that clarifies a whole lot, because I know that there's a lot of questions about that. Taking it back to just right now, those who have been affected by the fires, what are some of the things that they should be looking at when they have their policy? I'm sure they're going to call you and they're going to incur their insurance, right? Yeah. But what are some of the things that they should be immediately looking at in their policy?
They should look at their coverage for the dwelling coverage. That's the cost to rebuild the house.
Okay.
Since the pandemic and even this last year, the cost of construction has gone up probably over $100 a square foot. Depending on the policy, some of them will increase it based on some index with the construction industry, and some will not. If you have one that doesn't increase, then you may be short trying to rebuild your home. And if you don't check it until your house burns down, then you will maybe be in trouble. You can only rebuild half your homes. Even if you have a policy that increases with the construction costs, it's a number that's gone up so significantly that some of the insurance carriers, I think, are behind in their calculations. So you need to call, and this is probably the number one call I'm feeling right now, do I have enough coverage? It's on everyone's mind, because as you watch the news, you're hearing like, I don't have enough coverage, or they're not paying out. And there's a lot of kind of half-truths out there, but that's the most important thing right now, is to really sit down with their insurance person and say, do I have enough coverage? Also to verify, people will add onto their house and never call their insurance carrier or their insurance person and say, hey, I had it on 1,000 square feet. Well, if the house burns down today, we're not gonna rebuild 1,000 square feet. So there are things that you may have changed over the years that you need to bring up to the insurance person, but just mostly go over and just double check that you have enough coverage if your house burns down.
So do I have enough coverage? Yep. That's really number one. What are some of the other questions that these homeowners should be, questions or even just information they should be giving when they call their insurance company, right? Their insurance agent.
So when people have investment properties and they rent out long-term or short-term, there's something called loss of rents. And this can vary from whatever that is, we'll pay it, to we put a number in based on a percentage of the dwelling coverage. Sometimes it's more than enough, sometimes it's not enough, depending on where your home is. If you're out in Baker, California, it's probably enough. If you're now in Pacific Palisades, maybe not enough. So that's another area that you could, if you're out of your house for 3 years in a catastrophe like this, and you don't have enough coverage, that means you're coming out of pocket for the difference. So that's another big factor that you want to make sure. Personal property is another one you want to make sure is enough. But if people, there's a lot of personal property coverage on these policies, and even if you're short 10 or 20 grand, I don't think anyone's going to care at that point. It's really about rebuilding the house.
Yeah.
So the dwelling coverage, number one, and probably your loss of use or loss of rents would be the second biggest area, probably income loss or payment loss.
Okay. And then when it comes to personal property, just to touch on that, what are some of the things that the insurance company, that you can bet that the insurance company will probably require to see? Or
So the best thing to do for people to do is that not take pictures of what you have, but to do a video biography of your house, right? So you're basically going to go through your front door with your phone, and you're going to take a right, and you're going to start doing a commentary on everything you have. Yeah. You're going to open the drawers and say, this is this. You know, I'm a cook, and I have these fancy pots and pans, right? So you want to illustrate anything out of the ordinary. In most cases, you know, if I told you my house, how big it was, how many bedrooms and bathrooms, I bet you could guess exactly what I have. And so it's a little bit easier. When you venture into the out of the ordinary, for example, I ride bicycles, right? And expensive bicycles. No one is going to believe the cost of bicycles I have in my house, right? So I keep more records on those than I do on the sofa, just fine, right? Yeah. So the more expensive it gets and the more out of the ordinary, you want to do more documentation. Now, when it comes to things like jewelry and handbags and different things that cost a lot of money, especially women's handbags, sometimes they want to see pictures with you out on the town with it. Not just, oh, I just got this, but, you know, pictures. So over time, you want to go out with your stuff and have people take pictures of you.
Yeah.
It's this handbag, this is this, you know, him showing the ring. And so that's kind of what you want to do. But the best thing is video all your stuff, and it might take 20 or 30 minutes to go through every room, go through the garage and do that. And then hopefully it goes to the cloud and it's there.
Yeah.
And then another thing that people do.
And now that's just preventative, right? Yeah. That's preventative. But what about the people that have gone through, now have been affected by the fires? Yeah. And so what are some of the things that now they have to collect? Like, do they have to go back on their phone, right, and look at like videos and things that they can gather to send it to their insurance company?
The more extreme the item, the more you have to show. Now, I think there's a level of, you know, this was a 4,000 square foot house. It had this many bedrooms. There's an assumption. There's so many beds. There's so many sofas. Yeah. If you have 1,000 square foot house and you say you have 10, flat screen TVs, there's a high likelihood they're going to make you prove that. But if you say I have one, they're going to believe that. So again, they're going to be lenient on some things and not so lenient on other things, depending on, there are cases where people will literally say, I had 10 TVs and they were stolen, and they have pictures of TVs in each room, but then they find out later it's the same TV in every room, and they do that. So in this case, when you can't maybe not prove anything and the pictures might be gone, there's a lot of things that happen, there's going to be some leniency based on the fact that most people are going to have this stuff in their home. Yeah. And the size of the home and the cost of the home also determines they may have a better quality of furniture versus, so if someone says I have this, designer sofa in this, there's going to be more of a thought that in this house they probably do have that, or in this house they probably don't have that. It's not an exact science, but the best thing to do is save as many receipts. Some people have a cloud drive in the family. Every receipt they buy, they categorize into file folders like home furnishings, tools, kitchen stuff, so that's actually a good idea. Yeah. Easier said than done because people aren't that disciplined, but I have people that are that disciplined.
And then there's people that aren't that techie. Yeah. So I'm sure that there's people that have been affected by the fires now that maybe didn't do videos and, there's not on the cloud because they don't even know how to use that. Yeah. So that's going to be really interesting to see what happens with that. It's unfortunate. So Tim, what are some of the questions that you're getting in terms of timeline? Like how long is it going to take for a claim, right? Mm-hmm. And then also to get started to rebuild or collect a check?
Okay, good question. Let's step back to just say one home burnt down in a neighborhood. Okay. The adjuster is going to come out that day and going to look at everything and determine the costs, and you're going to be okay to hire a contractor and hopefully start rebuilding. And let's say it's a partial burn down, and start rebuilding almost immediately. The check flows fairly quickly, and the difference here is that when you have 14,000 structures that have burned, there's going to be permitting processes. There's first scraping the lot, and that is now I think FEMA is going to be starting to do some of that. That could take a year by itself, 14,000 structures. I don't know. I think this is such a unique situation that I think the timeline is going to be, the people themselves won't be in control of the timeline. There's a lot of outside factors. So let's say the lots get scraped. Now you have permitting processes. When you're in certain areas, you're down by the coast, you have the Coastal Commission, you have the permitting process. Yeah. Some of these permits take up to a year. Now, we're hearing that they're going to shorten that timetable, but how long is it going to take to process, 14,000 permits? So my feeling is, just based on some experience and talking to other people and listening to experts, this is going to take probably a minimum of 3 years to get back into their home. So,
3 years.
3 years. It could be, in many cases, 7 years. Now, there's another factor that's taking place in some of the areas, and that is the rains may cause mudslides. So people some of them are being cautioned to rebuild. Don't rebuild too quickly. In fact, let the people above you rebuild before you do, because if the mudslide comes, there's not really coverage on that. Right. So there is going to be a situation where some people are not going to rebuild purposely for a while, and some are going to want to build right away. I have a young couple, first-time home buyers in Altadena. They need to get back into a home.
Yeah.
So they're going to try and move fairly rapidly. It just depends on the permitting process. Altadena is going to have a different process than Pacific Palisades. So I would say the quickest anyone. If you were just a lone home and your neighborhood got burned down, it's about a year.
About a year.
If you can get through the permitting process pretty rapidly. This is going to be longer. I have a feeling, just listening to professionals, and this is probably going to hold true, the community may not even be back to where it was before the fires for 10 years.
Yeah, I could see that.
It's going to be a different lifestyle. People are now moving out of the area because their kids' soccer team is no longer going to practice there. Their schools closed down, and so they say, you know what? And they have the ability to move to a different area. I insured a guy about 3 years ago. He bought a house down in Irvine at Shady Canyon. He sold it, went back to LA. His kids are involved in all this stuff in Pacific Palisades. Now that his house did not burn down, but he's moving back to Irvine because he wants his kids won't have a life where he's at now. So they're going to leave because of that. And I think many people that have the means will probably buy homes out of the area, build their home, and then move back someday, but they're not going to be in a hurry. I think there's going to be a lot of lots that will never rebuild, they'll sell. There are people out there willing to purchase as many lots as they can and spend the rest of their life building spec homes in Pacific Palisades for people that want to buy it. And sometimes that's the quicker path, is to sell your home, to sell the lot, take the insurance money, get the money for the land, and buy the next home that's developed in the area from one of these developers.
So you make a really good point, because now you're saying these are the people that have the option, to, like your client, to move to Shady Canyon, right? To the other property that he had. What about those that don't have that option, right? And what is that going to look like? What do you believe that's going to look like in the next year while rebuilding is happening, or the next 3 years? Does the insurance do anything to help them out for temporary housing?
Yeah, for 3 years they do. The difficulty is, with that many people being displaced, it's going to be hard. There's already, there's the law against gouging, right? So if you have your home listed or you have a rent listed, and you can't just go increase it, but you're going to find situations where, I've already seen this, where people are on the front lawn fighting because they felt they should get the rental over the other person because of the family, and so there's not a lot of rentals out there. How are you going to house, that many people that are displaced? Then the other factor is that you have a lot of tenants. The place that they were renting, or the apartment building they were renting in, has burned down. And if they don't have renters policies to give them some loss of use, they're going to have to go find a place. And if they lost furniture, it's not the landlord's responsibility to help them out. And the landlord is concerned about paying the mortgage still on the place, and it's not there. So I think that's going to be a really tough thing for a lot of people. If they work in the area, they may not be able to live in the area anymore if they're renters, because there's just not a lot of rentals available. So
even hotels right now, they're just fully packed, fully packed. I'm getting messages left and right like, Gia, do you have anyone with rentals that can hold this family of 8, hold this family of 6? It's really devastating. It really is. What would you say to those that have been affected, Tim, or that know someone, a loved one that has been affected? What are the things that they immediately should do?
I think So my wife and I are giving away, we have a situation where my mother-in-law, we just moved into assisted living, and we are giving all her furniture, everything away to people that have been displaced because they have nothing. And so we have a little group that we're getting together with, and we're going to try and promote this. Just if people have stuff they don't need, and we went through all our closets and stuff that I don't wear that often. We just got rid of stuff because so people can call up. There's organizations in these areas that they need help. If you've got an extra sofa or an extra chair or dining room table, I mean, there are people that really need this stuff that aren't the wealthy, and they have nothing right now. So that's a good thing to do. I think you just if you have temporarily, not everyone's a family member to come in and live with them all the time, but I think this is a time you help people out. If they need a place to stay, if you have an ADU in the back, it's not being utilized, maybe you find someone that would work in that situation and bring them in. So
and those that have been affected, I'm sure it's so hard at this time to even reach out for help, right? Maybe they didn't even have that personality to go and reach out for help, and this is the time where communities, where families, where everyone should really come together. So
that my first-time home buyer couple in Altadena that were displaced, and I knew they don't know what's about ready to happen, and I was telling them, make it an adventure. It's going to be a long haul.
It is going to be a long haul. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. Thank you so much for bringing more clarity, and you keep praying for LA. Thank you.
Thank you.